Okay, so Chelsea, if it's okay, I'm just going to read out the questions and answer them.
Hi.
Hey,
So I will start with the first question, I guess, because I raised my hand.
alrighty.
um, Hi. Um,
Hello.
okay, it's a little bit two or three parter.
Okay.
Um, I've seen three trends in lens design on cameras.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is the vintage approach to make less elements and to get much micro contrast and the payoff of chromatic aberrations and imperfections. The second
Mm-hmm.
approach I see is the sharpest, most perfect without any imperfections. And the third is the super zoom. Do you
Oh, right.
see, yeah, till from 10 millimeter to 600 would be the
Yeah.
best thing you ever could have. Do you see any future for these three parts of lenses and any milestones we will reach in the next 5 till 10 years?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, thanks for the detailed question. I'll call you Scott. uh, so so you are right. Let me elaborate on each of the three. So I'll go backwards. Super zoom lens, as you said. So these are more, in my mind, they're more utility lenses. They're not so much for, say, like the connoisseur, uh, which wants to look at, say, the what the quality is, or like a purposeful, um, degradation of the quality to get that old school look, if you want. But these are really utility lenses. People need these lenses, either if you're, say, like an amateur and you want one lens to be able to take photographs of, birds in a tree at like 600 millimeters, and say like a group shot of, 50 people, and you don't want to switch lenses around. Um, and maybe not so much for the maybe not the super zoom for the professional. They might use like three or four, say like a wide range zoom, and then a normal zoom, and then a long range zoom. They might split them up into three or so. But if you're doing something like sports photography of a F1 race or something, you're not really considering things like how artistic the photo is going to be. You want it to be in focus, and you want to be able to get the shot. Um, at that point, it's not just the it's not just the lens, but also the camera. So I really think that the long range super zooms are really utility lenses, and so they need to have high quality if it's commercial. And they can get pretty big. You might be able to hit somebody with it and knock them out. They become pretty big and heavy. Um, then there's the middle one that you said, which is like super high quality, high micro contrast. I can think of a few already right now, but there's the Nikon. Is it 55 millimeter? I forget, but f point point 95 or something. This is also a huge lens. It uh could be mistaken for a super zoom lens. It probably costs like somewhere upward of let me do the math. Upwards of like 10,000 euro or something like that. And they're made like on demand. Now, those are designed with like most likely designed with software, of course, but the purpose is to have like the best quality across the entire range of the picture, very low distortion, like no chromatic aberration or achromatic or apochromatic, even further in some cases, with super creamy bokeh and things like this. And so this is like more of the of the artisanal, like high-end um, lenses that sometimes for commercial photography, if for these people that are taking either a portrait or say like still photos and things like that. And and that last the first group that you said, the more artisanal lens are trying to decrease, say, the number of elements. Now, this has the opposite effect of that super high lens. So there's really no way with the modern technology, so the software that I work with, there's really no way to be able to create a lens that has low quality if you're not paying attention. And the low quality could not be, say, like the low quality of old. So we do say that some of the older lenses they have this dreamy look. That's not because it was purposefully put in there, but it was because from limitations such as not being able to the technology for coding wasn't great. So if you had 20 lenses in the system and the coding wasn't great, then the lens would be really dark, like wouldn't be able to take photos very well. So out of necessity, the lens elements were there weren't that many lens elements, right? And what happens when there aren't enough elements is that you don't have the degree of freedom to be able to manipulate the image and get rid of these things called aberrations and stuff, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but aberrations that can't be taken away with fewer lenses, right? Um, and so some of the I say modern, but some of the more recent lenses that have this artisanal look, like the swirly bokeh or like this fuzzy look, lots of chromatic aberration and maybe even some spherical aberration. Either I see two ways that these are done. There's one which the camera maker purposefully limits the number of lens elements so that the aberrations are still present in the lens. And so you can see these from from lenses from Cosina, I believe. Cosina is the maker. The brand is like Voigtlander. Americans butcher it, and we say like Voigtlander, but Voigtlander. Scott, I think this from Germany, or I hear a German accent. So
Austria.
apologies if I'm apologies if I'm butchering the pronunciation. But
No, it's okay.
yeah, but they have this lens line where they purposefully limit the number of lenses so that they get the effect of the days of old, like the 1930s, the 1920s type of look. And then in that first group you said there's another group actually, like a subgroup in that first group that you said of limiting lens elements. There's a group of people that mm, have huge respect for the traditional lenses, and so they pull like patent data, like the old patent data that they see. Think it's patent data. It could be like actual old data or not old data, but actual old lenses that they kind of dismantle and measure. But either way, they're taking these old designs and they're like recreating the old designs as new lenses, because as the older lenses from the 1930s, 40s, and 60s, they start degrading for any reason, right? They could have developed mold, the coatings could go bad. There's the old lenses for the cemented lenses. They used to use a type of adhesive, which isn't modern. Our modern adhesives are chemical, but the old adhesives used to be taken from like a tree sap. Um, the gum from a tree, and so those can degrade, right? Uh, and so you can get these older designs. So the concept is to get these older designs, classical designs, but as new, so that they last at least a little bit longer than these ones from the early 20 or early 1900s. So I've seen that trend as well. So that's elaborating on the three lens types that you said. And I guess your final question on where do I see things going as a trend in the next 5 to 10 years? I actually see the first part, the first group of lenses that you said, these older, it's already happening, but I think it will just like exacerbate into a larger group. But the people like, if I can assume, people in this group that are interested in these older classical lenses for, to kind of explore their art or to recreate, say, the look and feel of a classic old photo that they really love. Things like this. I think that market is is growing, and will grow in the next 5 to 10 years. Otherwise, the other two that you mentioned, the super high performance lens and the super zoom lenses, I think the technology there has gotten really good. And although we'll see some improvements, we won't see astronomical improvements in those sorts of realms. We might see, say, like a longer zoom range. We might see we might see like a higher resolution that's needed for, say, because the cameras will also evolve too, right? And so the camera sensors, sorry, the camera sensors might evolve, and then the lenses we might have to adapt for those sensors too. So I do see like incremental advancements in those two as well. But I think as a commercial part, that first one, these old artisanal lenses, that's where I see things going. Don't know if I answered your question well. A bit
Yes,
long-winded,
thank you.
but yeah.
Uh, One really short follow-up question. Do you think
hmm
lenses will get cheaper price-wise? So
Mm.
production gets cheaper
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
the
Uh, I'm going to say no, but they already are cheaper in a sense, and I'll explain. So, uh, dollar for dollar or euro for euro, they are not cheaper now, right? You see, I think Leica even recently raised their prices, accordingly. But I think that's just really inflation. And so if you say, well, I used to be able to buy this lens for 500 euros, now it costs, 650 euros. Um, that that might be a trend that we'll see, right? Manufacturing costs and things like this, those people's labor, right? Our salaries are going up, so whoever's making our lenses, those salaries have to go up accordingly with inflation. And so I don't see that changing. However, I say they're a little bit cheaper because back like in the night, I keep going back to the 1930s, but even in the 80s and even in the 60s, the lenses were costing a few $100s, and if you're as old as I am, you remember that say like a cola would cost like 1 euro, or a coffee would cost 1 euro or something like that, or $2 or something like this in the US. And those have gone up in price, right? But I don't think the price of lenses has gone up as much as like normal things like rent a car or even like a hamburger or something like that. So in that sense, I do feel that they're getting cheaper per if you factor in like inflation. But I don't see lenses themselves getting very much cheaper in the future.
cool. Thank you very
Hmm.
much.
Yeah. Um, So I see a question in the chat, and I really appreciate people, getting unmuted and asking questions because it feels really interactive. But I don't want to leave these people for whatever reason can't unmute themselves, go unnoticed. So I'm going to read one question. It says, okay, so it comes from Bees. And what are some of the common trade-offs made in lens design? And this person has a follow-up question, so I'm not going to go too far. But yes, there are trade-offs made in lens design. I did talk about it with Naked Scott, I think, just a few minutes ago. But to improve the performance of a lens, you generally have to add lens elements. That's generally how it works. Um, you might have seen things like aspherical lenses, and so aspherical lenses also, they sound really fancy, where the shapes are really complex. But what aspherical lenses do essentially is they try. Um, yeah, so sorry, bees. I might have answered part of the second question, trying to answer the first question. So yes, there are size constraints. There are cost constraints. Um, Technically, yeah. So the other trade-off that's unfortunately because we live in a commercial world, maybe one of the big trade-offs and constraints. So so there aren't that many manufacturing constraints currently because we've gotten really good with doing stuff. Unless we're going to go to like Abbott number, which accounts for really to be able to correct chromatic aberration. Likewise for the really high end, high index range and low Abbott number as well. So the materials tend to be really good. Manufacturing is at an all-time high. So going back to the beginning, the real trade-off sometimes is price, right? And price in well, not so much manufacturability, but what the cost is of that manufacturability, and then mass production as well. So the Nikon lenses that I mentioned earlier, those are like created on a per order basis. They don't have them in stock, so it goes to show how difficult they're made. Whereas for something like your 50 millimeter f1.8 that they mass produced, those are made, and almost given away with the camera, right? So if something's more expensive and people can't get their ROI, return on investment on their lenses, then it tends to get ignored in terms of how cheaply you can make it and how many you can make as well. So there's that. So refraction is a see-through, right? And reflection, so like the mirror that we look at every day. And depending on what we're looking for, I mean, maybe reflection. There are some reflective lenses, like the long 600 millimeter ones, um, that you might see, but maybe reflection aberration with reflection. But there's things like gold, for example. Gold's really good for infrared. But as you can see, since it has a yellowish tint or a goldish tint, for obvious reasons, it doesn't reflect, say, like the blue colors very well. So, and gold's a really great material. Unfortunate that it's really expensive, but gold's a really great material. But it's also really soft as well, so it needs to be protected, which is unfortunate. So, any sort of like really high quality reflection that we can get for a really long range of wavelengths, say like ultra UV and ultra infrared, that really long range, whilst still being really durable, that would be something that would be really nice. Not every optic can be like James Webb Space Telescope, where we shoot it up into space, where there's really not much that will degrade it, right? So that would be really nice to have. I can't really think of a way because I'm going back to the first question. I'm doing like all these trade-offs right now, along with price too. So for like the more common materials for us, they would be glass and plastic. And since I had a long career in plastic, the thing about plastic is we have a really narrow range of index of refraction and Abbe number for plastics. So per the earlier question, for glass we have things like 1.45 index of refraction, 1.4-ish, all the way up to like 1.96 or something like that. But for plastics, we really only have a range of like 1.5-ish to 1.65-ish or so. And even those ones at 1.65, they're yellowish, so we can only use them in infrared. And we also have problems with plastics in that they're much more durable in terms of shock, right? A glass will shatter a lot easier than a plastic lens, but they're not as resistant to heat and things like that. So a plastic lens that could be durable in heat, has a wider index range, that would help a lot because to be honest, plastic lenses are much easier to fabricate in these wild exotic shapes. If you ever look at a photo of a cross section of a cell phone lens, you'll see that they look almost like a seagull type of wing, and they have all these inflection points, right? So that would increase, say, like the degrees of freedom of what we could design. It's also possible to put little structures on top of plastic lenses too. So you could make a one lens of plastic out of, say, like two shapes, or you could put these diffractive little teeny tiny microstructures on top of a lens that would act as some sort of agent, right? Optical agent. So that type of degree of freedom is available in plastic lenses, which is great. Um, but we just don't have range of index and things like that are available for these plastic lenses. Now for glass, it seems like we have a nice range, um, but the problem with glass usually is that they're either pretty big or pretty heavy, right? And so not all glass lenses are made alike. There's a huge range of glass, like I said, but the vast majority of those glass lenses are created by grinding and polishing. So you have you have this metal, um, have this metal, for lack of a better word, uh, say like a sandpaper like rough surface in the shape of, say, like a radius of 50 millimeters or so, or 10 millimeters, and it just grinds and grinds and grinds the lens, right? And that takes time. Good precision, but it takes time, right? And you can only make these spherical lenses. So for aspherical lenses, they're either polished by hand, like they were in the 60s, by like a maestro, which also takes time, but they can also be molded as well. So the lenses are heated up and they're pressed with this aspheric shape and then released. But going back to the plastic as well, not all glass can be like heated up and melted and therefore molded, and so you don't get that same range of index, right? So um, that's a long-winded way of answering your question, in that the dream material would be combining all of the great features of all of these diverse lenses. And so even though, if you look at one aspect, say like moldability of a glass lens. Yes, it is moldable. Or you look at the range of index of refraction. Yes, there's a wide range of index of refraction. Um, what we would benefit with is like the intersection between those, so more choices within each of those groups. So if you drew like a Venn diagram, there's nothing that puts everything together. So you have a Venn diagram. Is it cheap or is it fast? Does it taste good or is it expensive? If we're talking about food, right? And so having materials that at least overlap a little bit more with each of these features would be really good. I don't see like in the near future, what those might be in terms of material. And so we're trying to make up with technology, right? So being able to make things in mass production, improving coding, improving the lens design, improving manufacturing, things like that, is precedented over like actual material technology. But you'd be surprised, some of the most like unexciting but big advancements in materials is simply being able to provide the same material but at a lower price. Sometimes that gets it over the hump because more research is going to be put into something that you can get the return on investment for. So not exciting, but that might be making the same thing but cheaper might be the thing that is most consistent. Hope that answered your question. I can follow up.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really cool.
Right. Good. So if there's no follow-up, there's a question from Matt in the chat. So I'm going to read this out. So it says, one of my favorite lenses to shoot for photos is a 150 millimeter, 1.33 anamorphic, meant for video. So what are your shots on shooting with cine lenses for photography? Oh, that's really interesting. So like I mentioned, oh, what are your thoughts? All right, sorry about that. Um, yeah, so one of the things that I said before is that I'm not like avid photographer. I'm not really good at photography per se. Um, I do have like a slew of lenses, and I actually don't own any cine lenses, but I do want to. So there's there's a focal length in cine lenses that's really popular, but not so popular in uh, in like still photography, and that's 65 millimeter, I think it is, and that's really popular. Um, as far as I know, right? I'm sure there's a lot of other more popular ones. And it's a really intermediate like focal length for people in still photography because you have the 50 millimeter, the normal lens staple, and then you go to maybe 85, perhaps. I know there are some in between. My favorite lens is 77 millimeter by Pentax. Um, Again, weird focal length. But 65, it has that perspective, and it has that range that I guess a lot of people really liked when they were shooting their 88 millimeter film or whatever during back in the day. And not only that, but the particulars of cine videography are different from photography, right? You don't use bokeh quite as much. You might want everything in focus. You actually use things out of focus. You don't need what you need to be able to do in videography is kind of separate the subject with the background just a little bit so that it's enhanced. Um, and there's that cine look. Oh, sorry, I'm doing air quotes that you can't see, but there's that cine look that kind of gives it that yellowish or amberish hue, which I think is from the coatings of the day, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Um, and that cine look you can kind of get with with digitally, right? With sensors and stuff nowadays. But being able to get it like from the optical point of view, I think is also pretty cool. So overall, at the end of the day, what is video, right? Video is essentially lots of frames per second of a still. And so if you stop a video, you get that still photo, right? So although these cine lenses are meant probably technically out of necessity for things that move, I don't see I don't I don't see any reason why we can't use it for still photography, and that's why I'm pretty interested in some of those lenses that I mentioned, like the amberish yellowish hue look, and that 65 millimeter really has me intrigued. I don't know what kind of photos I'd be able to take with that. I'd be pretty confused at first on how to use it, but that's just part of the learning process, right? Right, anamorphic has blue flares, which you could probably use to your advantage. Right, anyone else? Or follow up? I mean, it doesn't have to be a question, right? I can answer comments too, or we can have a discussion.
Why is the 77 your most favorite?
Right. Yeah, I walked into that one, didn't I? So the first camera that I owned was a Pentax Max, I think. It was a compact camera of the day. It had the standard lens on it. But it's the camera that my grandfather gave my mom when I was born, right? So it still works. Had a bit of nostalgia with it. Put some film in. I went out to shoot, and so I started collecting lenses for the Pentax. Did a bit of research on it and found like this line. I can't remember what the lens line was called, but there were three lenses. One was a 43 millimeter f 1.7, I think it was. And the other one was a 31 millimeter, and the last one was the 77. And they set them up as like these exotic three lensers for like the normal range, the wide range, and the tele range. And they were quite a bit expensive than the other ones. But they came out in like the late 90s or so. And by the time I bought them, they were like 10 years old. They weren't really they weren't really that sought after, and I got them at a good price, new. But the 77, I don't know what it is about it. The 77, it's not too long that the field of view is so short, but it is distinctly long that it differentiates from a 50. And so I use that as my portrait lens. It's got really nice creamy bokeh. Um, and this is the nerd and lens designer in me. But after doing more research, that line of lenses, um, ooh,
Limited
am
is
I
the
audible?
yeah,
Yeah, the limited series. That's the one. The
yes,
limited
that's
series.
the
Yeah.
word you're searching for.
Yeah. So they didn't have, so per our earlier discussion, they did not have like super aspherical lenses. They don't have like super micro contrast. They're not like super fast. They're not like super wide angle. Um, and they actually have a little bit of spherical aberration and chromatic aberration. Again, out of necessity because this is like the late 90s. Um, but when I was doing my research on them, at least for the 77, so for the chromatic aberration, there's this shape. You get a shape, or say like for the green spectrum, you get a shape. It looks kind of like wavy, and it goes from uh, center of the lens to the outermost of the lens, right? So the range of the lens. And that shape, if it's a perfect image, that line is straight. But it's generally not. We call it the longitudinal aberration. It could either look like an S shape. It could either look, it could be shifting to the left, or it could be shifting to the right. And generally, what we try to do with lens design is we try to minimize that range because we want the least amount of chromatic aberration possible. And so like the green line could be shifting left, and the red line could be shifting right, but overall it's short, right? And there's the blue one as well. This longitudinal aberration, they could have like weird shapes. The thing I read with the 77 at least was that although the absolute chromatic aberration might not be like the minimum it could be, that shape, whatever that shape is, let's say it looks like an elongated S. That elongated S shape for the red, green, and the blue were all the same shape, which is which is purposeful, right? It's unique in that sense because what we try to do generally is we just try to minimize it and we don't really care about the shape. But that shape of how that wavelength goes from the center of the lens to the edgemost of the part. Those three wavelengths, and presumably the wavelengths in between, are all aligned, right? Which means that with each color, you don't get that color shift depending on where you are. So the center of the lens is perfect, but the edge of the lens is red, and in the middle it shifts a little bit green. It would be the typical lens design, not noticeable at all, right? But not noticeable at all to the human eye. But this 77 lens, that gradation of the color was consistent from the center to the edge, which gives it, so for skin tones or for wildlife photography, it gives that color range that's not perfect, but that gives that gradation that's more consistent than say a normal lens. And there's no way that I have the eye to be able to discern any of this. But just knowing the fact that it was designed with care and in a method that was unique to others, kind of made me love that lens a lot more. So it's the nerd in me that fell in love with it, and with my photography technique, I wouldn't be able to get the most out of it. But with my photographic technique, which is not very high, it's a great lens to shoot with, in that it's distinct from the other lenses that I own. So that's why I like that one. So one out of necessity because I was using Pentax lenses because I wanted as many lenses as I could, but that it had a unique story, and that's kind of why.
If I remember correctly, and I have one copy in my hand right now.
Hmm.
They made it the focal length and the aperture has the
Yep.
reason because they designed it in the most natural combination, like it came to them. They wanted to make a 1.8 and
Yeah.
made the math, and so they came to the 77.
That's correct, actually.
That,
Yeah.
yeah.
If I can, yeah, if I can add to that, the other ingredient was how could they make it as compact? Because you have it in your hand, and people online, if you just look at 77 millimeter f1.8, there aren't any other lenses with that focal length, so you'll be able to see it in Google. But they wanted to make it a certain size as well, and so they started with like an 85 and f1.8. But they couldn't make it as small. They couldn't make it small and compact because that was another feature. They didn't want like a hulking lens. And so to be able to get it to 77 millimeter, generally what we do is we scale it down a bit, and it can. So 85 millimeter is big, and if we scale it down to 77, we can just scale the lens down smaller, and without really changing the shape or the design. Maybe in little minor tweaks here and there. But in essence, you can shrink the lens down and you can decrease the focal length. So with with keeping the aperture the same. So that's kind of what they did. You're absolutely right. They came to this partly out of necessity, but they had these parameters that they wanted to adhere to, and ended up with 77. I don't know why they chose 77. Maybe because um, it was a cool number, or they wanted the 7 and the 7, or that no other 77 existed or something like this. But yeah, absolutely right, and a nice story behind it too. If I can elaborate though, the other lens that they had, 31, also I think similar as well, because that one is
No,
also really
wasn't
fast, right?
I have it here, but I must. I think it's a 33.
What's a 33? I'm sorry,
I
but
think it's a 33.
okay, 43.
Yes, 43.
Yeah. There's another one that's wide though, a 31 or something, and that was also similar in the line. It was the newest one, so it was made a few years after. They wanted that one compact too, so instead of going 28, I think they went 31. And the 43 was the first lens that they made out of the three. And
True.
that one, I think the reason is obvious. We see a lot of them nowadays, even with like the Leica Q3 43. But that's the diagonal of one of a full frame, as we say now. But at the time, the film, right? It's the diagonal 36 by 24. If you take the diagonal, Pythagoras theorem, it's 43. So that's why 43. And I think they were the first ones to. Pentax was the first one to make that 43 as well, because we had 40 for a while, but 43, I think that was the first one. Not sure. That's also a
I'm
nice
not
lens.
sure either. Yes, it is. It's my favorite. It's
Oh, is it? Okay.
yes, but both are very very good lenses. But the 43 is my all day all round
Right.
thing.
I think 50 millimeter. There's so many 50 millimeter lenses, but 50 millimeters is a little too narrow field of view for me. And 35 is too wide for me. So I like having something in between. I have a 40 millimeter Ultron, I'm a Folklander. So I like that one a lot, and you use it a lot. My day-to-day camera, sorry to disappoint, but my day-to-day camera is a GR, like the Ricoh GR. It's digital and compact fixed lens. But I use the GR 3X, which has a 40 millimeter equivalent. So I really like that one, and I just carried around. So the perspective is similar. So yeah, my walk around lens is also very close to 40 millimeter. Anyone else have a favorite lens?
I bet there are a few.
56 1.2. Oh, that sounds what's that one? That sounds like a Fujifilm
Oh,
lens.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Nice. So
Yeah.
85 equivalent. That's a really nice one too.
A classic.
Hmm. Spherical too, I believe.
Yes.
500. Wow. 500 millimeter f5.6. That's got to be big too.
My
6
reason
milli.
it's a favorite is that it's not that big. It's got a Fresnel element in
Really?
it, so I can actually hand carry it all day looking at birds.
Wow. Oh, that's got to be really useful. I could talk about for another hour on Fresnel lenses because there's a big history on that. But if it's a Fresnel lens, it's Canon, right?
This one is a Nikon.
Nikon? Okay. Yeah. Canon was pretty yeah, PF. That should have rung a bell for me. But yeah, Canon was early on, used these Fresnel lenses a lot, and did some innovation with that too. But yeah, Matt is saying Laowa 6 millimeter rectilinear. Yeah. I would be really struggling to use that lens. And Olympus 40 to 150 zoom. Yep, that's a good one too. So the Micro Four Thirds, being a smaller sensor, is able to make more compact lenses with a wider range. A colleague of mine, a really good photographer, uh, uses a Panasonic, and so I think it's similar, but he uses the 1260 millimeter, which is 24 to 120, right? And you can't really get a 24 to 120 super high quality fast lens, um, very compact, but you can for Micro Four Thirds, so that's pretty good. Yeah, the 40 150, if you use that one, you could pretty much do the vast majority of tele photography with just that one.
If you have a few minutes, I'd love to understand the
Mhm.
Fresnel a bit more. I'm not
Oh, really?
sure
Yeah,
exactly what
I've
my
got.
question would be on it, but like, how do you make it like the normal way that I think about Fresnel is like lighthouse lenses for
Yeah,
illumination,
yeah.
but this is for
That's
imaging, which is really neat.
that is so. That's great because great that you know that because that's exactly how Fresnel lenses started. It started with a lighthouse lens. So lighthouse lens was built by combining three or five of these lenses together. The purpose of a Fresnel lens is to make the lens really thin, right? The performance degrades, but you want to make it thin. And the reason why, again, everything out of necessity, but it was from necessity out of bringing things up into the top of the lighthouse, right? Because if we needed a long focal length for something really big, because we needed a huge light source to shoot the light out for the lighthouse. But to bring a huge lens, you'd still have the thickness of the lens if you made a normal lens out of it, and it would be super huge, really heavy, really cumbersome to bring up to the top of the lighthouse. And so what they did is they made for the Fresnel lens they cut it up into pieces concentrically and scrunched it together so that the thickness would be really thin and that you'd have say like you'd be able to bring it up in parts and then put it together at the top of the lighthouse. Um, and essentially for camera lenses too, the purpose is the same. We wanted to make something really thin, and so this is going back to the making things with a bunch of lenses, rather wanting to make it compact with one lens rather than a multiple of lenses. So the Fresnel lens, one good thing about the Fresnel lens is that it could color correct, and you could combine it with another material. You could stick it into another material. It would have that effect of a normal cemented lens, where it changes where that difference between the index of refraction, and it improves the color correction. Now the difficult part is that you get these unwanted diffractions as well, and you get like this flare, like this really weird flare of stray light all over the place. And so this lens had to be put in strategically. And so the old lens would be a normal spherical lens and then a one sheet Fresnel lens, like kind of sandwiched in between two lenses and protected. And as things evolved, they were able to cement the Fresnel lens. So you don't want the Fresnel lens because it looks like a saw, right? The edges are really sharp. So if you have that like really in the air, you could scratch it, and the Fresnel lens would get damaged. And so they embedded it with two materials together, and it got the effects out of that without it, being as delicate on the surface. And then the next evolution was, hey, if one Fresnel lens is great, two must be even better. So then what they did is they had a Fresnel lens, and they flipped the Fresnel lens around, and they sandwiched like a plastic element in between two Fresnel lenses with the blades kind of facing inwards with each other, and so you get like two Fresnel lens effects in one lens, but essentially three lenses kind of stuck together. I think that's the most recent development there. Again, really hard to manufacture. It takes advantage of like being able to scrunch down like multiple lenses into one, and very, very useful for these longer focal lengths. You won't see Fresnel lenses too much in wide angle or normal angle lenses. It's really to decrease that longitudinal chromatic aberration that I was talking about, because that gets enhanced as the focal length gets longer, right? So when the focal length gets longer, say like the red light and the blue light and the green light, they all focus at a different spot. If you're just talking about parallel light coming in and the center of the lens, and that gets more pronounced, and they wanted to decrease that one with, and there's a lot of ways to do this, but one way is to use these Fresnel lenses. So I did. I attended a workshop where they talked about diffractive lenses, I think, and one of the topics were these long angle focal lengths. Incidentally, by Canon, the person speaking was working at Canon and developing these for these zoom lenses. So that's kind of where my mind went to when you mentioned Fresnel lens.
Super neat. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Chelsea, I droned on for an hour. Turns out I took like what, 5 questions, but it took me an hour to do. So yes, should have said at the beginning I was long-winded. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, when Chelsea and I we were thinking about setting this up, said what's the best time frame, and of course the audience, for this Discord chat, mostly are North American and quite a bit from Europe too. So decided to do it earlier in my morning. It's not that early. It's 7 right now, so it's not that bad. But I know it's really late for the people in Europe, and for the people in the US, could have been doing anything on your Sunday afternoon. But thanks for joining here. If this was worth your time, or if Chelsea thinks that it was worth everyone's, if Chelsea thinks it was worth everyone's time, then maybe we could we could do another time zone if people in Europe felt like they had to wake up, stay up really late for it. If we do it in a Europe-friendly time zone where I'm awake, Chelsea might have to wake up really early. So we'll discuss that. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining.